The third largest employer in the world is the Chinese Army, with just over 2 million people. Coming in at number 2 is the Walmart Army, with about 2.3 million employees. But the largest employer on planet Earth is the United States Department of Defense, which with more than 3 million employees. It's the largest single organization on Earth. With all those workers and all those many agencies within it, all part of the gigantic U.S. Department of Defense, they have a lot to keep track of at the Pentagon. But last year, in September, made for particularly bracing headlines when the director of one Pentagon agency said, quote, "I've got murderers who have access to classified information. I have rapists. I have pedophiles. I have people involved in child porn. I have all these things at the interim clearance level. And I'm pulling their clearances on a weekly basis." January of this year, NBC News obtained a report from the Defense Department showing that 165 contractors to the Department of Defense had interim security clearances revoked because of illicit activity of some kind. Things like questionable financial transactions or being influenced by a foreign government, or one person who got an interim security clearance in 2015 was discovered in 2017 to have been found guilty of raping a child. He was found guilty of raping a child before he ever applied for that. Think of that. Guilty, on record, as guilty of child rape, but nevertheless sailing right through to an interim security clearance. Seems like maybe getting an interim security clearance isn't that hard. For the past several months, Democrats in the House Oversight Committee have been trying to get answers about the machinery of security clearances inside the Defense Department and beyond. Top Democrat on that committee is Elijah Cummings. He wrote to the Republican chair of the committee last month, quote, "I've asked you repeatedly to join me in investigating critical failings in our nation's security clearance processes and troubling irregularities with the security clearances of senior aides to President Donald J. Trump." Well, today, in light of the news going on right now, Congressman Cummings sent the Oversight Chairman another letter, this time asking again for an investigation into the White House's practices around security clearances, and now particularly asking for information about former senior aide Staff Secretary Rob Porter. Quote, "If you had agreed to any of our previous requests for information on these matters, the White House would have been required to answer key questions about why Rob Porter was denied a final security clearance, who at the White House was aware of that information, and how Mr. Porter was allowed to remain in his position. Instead, because of your multiple refusals, we did not find out about any of these issues until they were reported in the press." Mr. Porter, the White House staff secretary, announced he was stepping down yesterday after allegations of abuse from his 2 former wives. He denies those allegations. But the White House reportedly knew about them for months and knew they were stopping him from getting a permanent security clearance, and they kept him on, handling the flow of documents to the president, including super sensitive material, while there were active concerns that he was a potential target for blackmail and that he was unsuitable for the kind of clearance that would allow him to see that material. The White House maintains tonight that the president had no idea about any of these concerns about Rob Porter, thus raising the question of who exactly cleared Rob Porter to see that classified information, and whether or not the president ever formally waived the clearance process so that he could see those documents without